Cannon Fodder for the New World Order. By Diana Spingola, August 25, 2010. In 1926, General Tirpitz wrote, "Or is only a legalized mass murder." Thus Christ pointed out those who arrange all wars and revolutions, and that their chief cause is Satan and his son's lust of murder. But Christians never seem to agree with Christ. Gandhi concurred when he said, "Very own, but Christians understands that Jesus was non-violent." Those who are arranging all wars are typically among the very top echelon of secret societies, often Illuminati front groups like Skull and Bones, many of whom serve in elected and unelected government positions. Government officials implement a dark agenda of terrorism and genocide through directives developed by members of the Council on Foreign Relations CFR, the Bilderberg BB, and the Trilateral Commission TC. Some may view these allegations as incredible conspiracy theories, which is exactly the perspective that the media-managing elites encourage in order to conceal their reprehensible operations and their true loyalties. General Tirpitz said that those who arrange wars have a lust of murder. They also demonstrate a lust for power and profit, made possible by government-sanctioned warfare, funded by privately owned central banks which print billions of debt-based, interest-laden dollars, debt that is passed off onto the citizens who also fight and die in those wars. The increased glut of cash into the market devalues the currency already in circulation and further jeopardizes the country's diminishing economy. The malevolent, parasitical bankers achieve their objectives by funding power-hungry, often psychopathic, well-compensated politicians who accommodate the bankers at the expense of the citizens they claim to represent. Representative government ends when the polls close. Christians have been persuaded to accept what Christ long ago disdained and warned against: usury. Citizens are manipulated into participating in war. Essentially, in accepting pro-war propaganda, we abandon Christianity and acquiesce to the mass slaughter of strangers targeted by the warmongers. In effect, we idolatrously worship the golden calf of the banker-backed, man-made state when we abandon the peaceful tenets of Christianity. If double-minded individuals, either naively or knowingly, promote war while claiming to abhor abortion, we absolutely must evaluate their motives and loyalties and then withhold our support for warfare. In Christianity, there should be no fence-sitting, no serving of two masters. The Ten Commandments include "You shall have no other gods before me" and "You shall not murder, kill." Communists and socialists, who like Lucifer, are rebellious towards God, attempt to replace him and impose their own laws upon the naive masses. And authoritative state advocates, with numerous deceitful justifications, mass murder through warfare, actually genocide of entire foreign populations. Like Lucifer, since Lincoln's War, the war planners always shift the blame for the initiation of warfare onto others via the use of false flag operations. The highly skilled war planners choreograph or aggressively provoke an attack and then call for a retaliatory strike against the people they attribute the attack to. From the shots fired at Fort Sumter, the explosion on the USS Maine, the sinking of the Lusitania, the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Tonkin incident, and numerous attacks on various U.S. embassies, there have been managed assaults. One of the major functions of the CIA is to create chaos in other countries, just so the U.S. can justify sending in military troops to restore order. That is how the deceitful war planners get our support. We believe that we are valiantly defending our country. Christians should be the first to recognize the probability of secret societies or secret combinations and money interests that are so intent on depriving others of their liberty, life and property. Christ's death, though redemptive, was the result of a currency conspiracy. There were also plots to kill Paul and other disciples. Early-day public relations provocateurs skillfully influenced the pliable masses in order to execute their covert agenda. Remember, the loving admirers who bowed before Christ upon his entry into Jerusalem were the exact same people who, a few days later, clamored for his death. What changed? The money-shangers, the same greedy people who sold the overpriced sacrificial animals in the temple courtyard, would have lost their future profits if people accepted his rational teachings on usury and the charitable cessation of the exploitation of others. After all, we work for our sakes, not to have others confiscate the product of our labors. government education spawns battalions of potential soldiers who are willing to die for their country. Eager soldiers have been advantageously and subtly prepared through compelling peer pressure participation in Pentagon-designed video games that have been commercially marketed as entertainment. Dutiful teachers working within the federally controlled educational system regularly memorialize the vilest, most warmongering politicians of the past. This subtle programming is supported by a controlled media which has been licensed and regulated by the federal government FCC since the 1920s. The international bankers, who profit most from warfare, have controlled the entertainment and documentary media for decades. Media moguls, often in conjunction with the Pentagon, produce movies that glorify war, promote immorality, immodesty and profanity, all in an effort to subtly shape our opinions, alter our culture and persuade us to abandon traditional Christian values. If Christians forfeit so-called small ideals, they are more likely to relinquish Christ's prohibition against warfare. Prior to the U.S. entering World War II, the influential media vilified anti-war activists by characterizing them as unpatriotic, Nazi and anti-Semitic. They were portrayed as American traitors too. These psychologically devised tactics were created by Edward Bernays, the nephew of Sigmund Freud, and are still employed today to discourage dissent and immobilize inquiry. Anti-war activists and dissidents are allowed airtime with super-skilled radio and television hosts whose sole purpose is to repudiate the ideas of their guests, ridicule the truth, and castigate candidates who question U.S. foreign policy. These tactics are designed to produce a herd mentality within the population. Individuals reconsider their rhetoric when they see others discredited for similar views and remain silent. These devices, which discredit individuals and information, also discourage others from examining certain events and circumstances for themselves. International bankers, without particular national loyalties or regard for those used as cannon fodder, typically fund both sides of every war and often have major investments in, or outright ownership of, ammunition production facilities. Guaranteed contracts for tons of one-time use bullets and bombs are tremendously more lucrative than selling cars and washing machines to consumers. Henry Kissinger, one-time U.S. Secretary of State, said, "Military men are just dumb, stupid animals to be used as pawns for foreign policy." Given the manner in which individual governments exploit soldiers to enrich the bankers, those troops are evidently expendable. Their bloodied bodies create massive profits for the international bankers, the original advocates of globalism, acquired through warfare, usually followed by sanctions, reparations and finally obedience to an international entity. A nation uses warfare to impose its policies on another nation. Gütli Schnapper Rothschild, the wife of Mayer A. Rothschild, who grew enormously wealthy by collecting usury while funding the European wars, said, "If my sons did not want wars, there would be none." One might add grandsons, great-grandsons and other male relatives and all of their banking affiliates camouflaged under numerous names, Goldman Sachs, Lehman, Kunlub, Citibank and others. While Mother Rothschild sounded decidedly cold-hearted, other Talmudic Judaics, like the contemporary Rabbi Chaim Druckmann, a leader of the religious Zionist movement, said on September 7, 2004, "Killing enemy civilians during war is normal." Druckmann and other like-minded Zionists view Gentiles and even their own Semitic kinsmen, the Palestinians, including children, as subhumans. The Talmud states, "Our lives come first." Druckmann ridiculed Christian opposition to warfare. "He Christian preaching of turning the other cheek doesn't concern us, and we will not be impressed by those who prefer the lives of our enemies to our lives." And who is the enemy? Any country that resists the international bankers' insistence on installing a central bank within their country. Further, banker-backed corporations target, confiscate and profit from the seizure and control of the natural resources in the said enemy's land. Many Christians, indoctrinated to believe that there is such a thing as a wood war, have unwittingly accepted barbaric total war tactics regarding unarmed women and children, and are perfectly willing to engage in mass slaughter at the behest of the bankers. Lenin Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, a Bolshevik, said, "The establishment of a central bank is 90% of communizing a nation." The way to get the U.S. to incrementally embrace communism began in 1913 with the establishment of the privately owned Federal Reserve. the massively wealthy owners of the Federal Reserve would ultimately invest in and sit on the boards of every major corporation and eventually capture the majority of America's wealth in addition to usury, burdensome taxation and continual warfare. International communism, adapted for expediency, was a means of brutal seizure of control, a perfect political mechanism for the international bankers. If people objected to tyranny, they were sent to slave labor camps or were quickly killed and silenced. Lenin and Trotsky Lev Davidovich Bronstein were divided on one issue. Lenin supported violent revolution while Trotsky favored a non-violent, intellectual approach to total government control. 6 Lenin maintained, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. In America, the bankers control the left and the right paradigm, the conservatives and the liberals, the Democrats and the Republicans. American Trotskyites, who prefer intellectual infiltration, seize the conservative label and continue to promote their agenda through numerous conservative groups. They manipulate and publicly promote certain religious leaders who then endorse that same agenda. The Trotskyites fund influential, noble-named think tanks and regularly appear in the media. Americans are aghast when they hear about the millions of Chinese and Russian citizens who have been slaughtered by their communist masters. Yet, under the federally sanctioned abortion laws, approximately 50 million people have been eliminated under the intellectual guise of freedom of choice. The ultimate abortion decision was fueled by the CIA-funded women's movement. Steinem and the others were well paid to pretend concern for the rights of women while ignoring the rights of infants. So rather than Lenin's depopulation method, the U.S. used Trotsky's more subtle process. The results are the same. Contemporary neocons William O. Kristol and Robert Kagan established the Project for a New American Century, which called for a Pearl Harbor in order to implement momentous change and to conduct Middle East warfare. Kristol's late father, Irving Kristol, who was often funded by the CIA, is known as the Oddfather of neoconservatism. His organization promotes warfare revolution, first in Iraq and now in Iran. Charles Krauthammer and Kristol, editor of the Rupert Murdoch Fund of the Weekly Standard, the official voice of this cabal, 7 and their neocon cronies provide opposition to the left agenda, as suggested by Lenin. On September 18, 2002, Kristol claimed that a war in Iraq would have terrifically good effects throughout the Middle East. Krauthammer and Kristol regularly appear on pro-Israel Murdoch's Iran-balanced Fox News, where they allege that Iran is building nuclear weapons, a subtle form of their previous allegations about Iraqi's weapons of mass destruction. Murdoch has always been a Rothschild family asset. On February 17, 2003, Krauthammer, a prominent Washington Post columnist writing in Time, admitted that America's imminent war against Iraq is not just to disarm Saddam. It is to reform a whole part of the world that the U.S. needs in the Arab world is not an exit strategy but an entry strategy. Iraq is the beckoning door. Krauthammer further targeted Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria and beyond as part of the neoconservative war policy. On February 18, 2003, as reported in the Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon suggested that the U.S. wage war on Iran, Libya and Syria after his successful destruction of Iraq. Krauthammer, a former psychiatrist, has called for an all-out U.S. war against the Muslim world. 10 War is the most effective way of bankrupting a nation and to set it up for total collapse and a tyrannical takeover. The warfare in the Middle East is not in the best interests of America, it only serves the international bankers. On March 17, 2003, just before the U.S. invaded Iraq, Kristol, in his editorial in the Weekly Standard, wrote, "Obviously, we are gratified that the Iraq strategy we have long advocated has become the policy of the U.S. government." On March 18, The Washington Post clarified his obvious influence when their columnist, Richard Cohen, referred to the impending conflict as Kristol's war, and prior to the Haqqani bombing of Baghdad, his would seem to be Kristol's moment. 1 Millionaires and billionaires buy up politicians. Those who defy the bankers suffer dire consequences, like Charles A. Lindbergh, whose grandson was kidnapped and murdered. Lindbergh had written articles of impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors against 5 members of the Federal Reserve Board: W.P.G. Harding, Paul M. Warburg, Frederick Delano, Adolph C. Miller and Charles S. Hamlin. Louis T. McFadden, Another defiant congressman died as a result of poisoning, their third attempt to eliminate him. Other non-compliant politicians are run out of office, assassinated, arrested, die in airplane crashes, are impeached or publicly humiliated. U.S. politicians understandably fear the international bankers more than they fear the wrath of their disgruntled constituents. Author R. Duane Willing, in his book Money, The 12th and Final Religion, claims that Richard M. Nixon, once compliant, fell from grace when he attempted to alter the nation's money system and develop an interest-free greenback-style currency which would have immobilized the national debt and obliterated the curse of usury. In 1969, Nixon appointed Dr. Preston Martin as chairman and chief operating officer of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. Martin allegedly masterminded Nixon's currency plan, which would have converted 4,950 savings and loans into full commercial banks with the capacity of issuing checking accounts. This would have created a nationwide banking network outside of the auspices of the Federal Reserve Network. 12 Austrian-born Arthur F. Bernsieg, chairman of the Federal Reserve 1970–1978, had offices on the 8th floor of the Watergate apartment hotel. On June 17, 1972, 5 Husky Watergate burglars were apprehended on the 6th floor after they had carried heavy files from Burns' office down to the 6th floor for photographing 13. Allegedly, the burglars had broken into the Democratic National Committee headquarters, a convenient cover story. However, Martin was apparently promised the future chairmanship of the Federal Reserve if he abandoned Nixon and the populist currency plan that would have ended the power of the Federal Reserve. Nixon was purged from the presidency by a media-driven frenzy and forced to resign on August 9, 1974.14. He was later pardoned by Ford, probably on the basis of his continued silence about the real details surrounding the Watergate break-in. Martin didn't replace Paul A. Volcker CFR, TC, and BB as chairman 1979–1987. Instead, Alan Greenspan was appointed as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Burns CFR suggested that a review board be established to evaluate wage and price freezes. 15 Nixon's handlers created a comprehensive New Deal, Democratic-style strategy called the New Economic Policy after clandestine consultations at Camp David with George P. Shultz CFR, Burns, Paul W. McCracken CFR, Caspar W. Weinberger CFR, TC, H. R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, Peter G. Peterson CFR, Volcker, John Connolly and speechwriter Bill Safire. Volcker initiated the collapse of the U.S. economy. He has, since 1952, as an economist for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, influenced U.S. economic policies. In 1962 he became the Director of Financial Analysis at the Treasury Department, and in 1963 he was appointed as Deputy Undersecretary for Monetary Affairs. He returned to the Treasury as Undersecretary 1969–1974, where he promoted international solutions to monetary problems. The House of Rothschild continues to influence the U.S. economy and domestic and foreign policies. Volcker, after having served as the Federal Reserve Chairman under Presidents Carter and Reagan, went to work for the Rothschilds as chairman of the European investment banking firm, J. Rothschild, Wolfenson and Company in March 1992. Since February 2009, he has been the chairman of the Economic Recovery Advisory Board under the obedient President Barack Obama, who continues to decimate the economy at the behest of the international bankers. Richard N. Goodwin, former speechwriter for President John F. Kennedy, assassinated in 1963, said, "Principal power in Washington is no longer the government or the people it represents. It is the money power." Under the deceptive cloak of campaign contributions, access and influence, votes and amendments are bought and sold. Money establishes priorities of action, holds down federal revenues, revises federal legislation, and shifts income from the middle class to the very rich. 6. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. 7. Endnotes. The Secret World Government or the Hidden Hand by General Tirp Spiridovich, The Anti-Bolshevist Publishing Association, New York, 1926, pages 8. Charles Lindbergh's September 11, 1941, Des Moines speech. Henry Kissinger was quoted in Kiss the Boys Goodbye, How the United States Betrayed Its Own POWs in Vietnam by Monica Jensen Stevenson and William Stevenson, Plume Publishing, New York, 1999, Judaism Discovered, a study of the anti-biblical religion of racism, self-worship, superstition and deceit by Michael Hoffman, Independent History and Research. Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, 2008, pages 473-474. The Synagogue of Satan, The Secret History of Jewish World Domination by Andrew Carrington Hitchcock, Rivercrest Publishing, Austin, Texas, 2007, pages 102. The Iron Curtain Over America by John Beatty, Chestnut Mountain Book, Barboursville, Virginia, 1968, pages 26-27. The High Priests of War, The Secret History of How America's Neo-Conservative Trotskyites Came to Power and Orchestrated the War Against Iraq as the First Step in Their Drive for Global Empire by Michael Collins Piper, American Free Press, Washington, D.C., 2005, pages 39. Crystal Clear, A Time by David Korn, The Nation, January 2, 2007. The High Priests of War, The Secret History of How America's Neo-Conservative Trotskyites Came to Power and Orchestrated the War Against Iraq as the First Step in Their Drive for Global Empire by Michael Collins Piper, American Free Press, Washington, D.C., 2005, pages 8. Ibid, pages 117. Ibid, pages 39. Money, The 12th and Final Religion by R. Duane Willing, The Barnes Review, Washington, D.C., 2008, pages 8-9. Ibid, pages 8-9. Ibid, pages 8-9. Arthur Burns Quotes of Interest. King James, Ephesians 6-12, see other translations of this verse. About the author. Deanna Spingola has been a quilt designer and is the author of 2 books. She has traveled extensively teaching and lecturing on her unique methods. She has always been an avid reader of non-fiction works designed to educate rather than entertain. She is active in family history research and lectures on that topic. Currently she is the director of the local Family History Center. She has a great interest in politics and the direction of current government policies, particularly as they relate to the Constitution.